Hi, my name is Austin Cruz with Texas Right to Life. You may remember me from my last video, Human Life Begins at Fertilization. Now, this video that you're seeing now is in response to some of the comments left on that video. And I'm responding to these comments because I think that they make some very good points that should be addressed, and so I will respond to some of the comments made and further elaborate on the points made in my last video. So I have with me some of the comments. And so I'll read them off and show my response. The first comment from Speed Skater reads, rocks can grow. Have you ever seen stalagmites and stalactites? Now this comment is in response to my distinction between living and non-living things, namely that living things grow while non-living things such as a rock do not. So he's pointing to stalagmites and stalactites as, as an argument, I guess, countering my distinction. However, the phenomenon of stalagmites and stalactites do not discredit my argument for discerning between a living and a non-living thing. We see this simply by looking at the way that these rock formations are created. When water goes through holes in the rocks, it dissolves minerals that are in the rock, like sugar dissolving in water. And this process creates what is known as calcium carbonate. The calcium carbonate remains in the water until it is released by dripping or other processes, and once the carbonate is released, it crystallizes, thus creating a rock called calcite. It is through this process that stalagmites and stalactites grow. But the growth that is taking place here is different from that of a living organism, as living organisms grow by their own cell reproduction and are the causes of their own growth. These rocks are not the cause of their own growth, and is in fact not even the same rock, but it's a layer of new rock being added onto the old rock. So as you can see, this does not discredit my argument for discerning between a living and non-living thing. The next comment is also from Speed Skater, and it reads, zygotes only grow because of the nutrients and oxygen provided directly by the mother. Left on its own, it would die almost immediately. So yes, it is true that a zygote only grows because of the nutrients and oxygen provided directly by the mother. But what difference does it make where the zygote, or any person for that matter, gets the oxygen and nutrients necessary to sustaining life? The fact of the matter is that once the zygote receives the oxygen and nutrients, it continues to develop through its own power. It's not the mother that's doing this, but the zygote itself. Now, if the case that you're trying to make here is one of viability, that it's not a human organism until it can obtain the oxygen and nutrients essential for survival on its own and is thus viable, then I would say to take it even further. Why not kill infants and young children? Why not kill the paralyzed, disabled, or elderly? Now you may agree with that idea, but if so, why should we be in uproar over cases like Casey Anthony's, or anyone who murders, neglects, or abuses their child, the disabled, or the elderly? Why even have such a department as Child Protection Services? If it is a matter of viability, then these cases are no different than a newly formed zygote in the mother, as they all depend on someone else to help them. Yet, it is their own physical bodies that takes care of all the actions to sustain their life. The next comment is also from Speed Skater. It reads, you made an argument that living things repair themselves. Right after you said that it will grow up to a living human being only if no exterior mishaps injure it. Sounds like you just contradicted yourself. Now the exact line being quoted here was taken from Dr. Maureen Condic in her article, When Does Human Life Begin? A Scientific Perspective. Now the line that I quoted reads, the zygote acts immediately and decisively to initiate a program of development that will, if uninterrupted by accident, disease, or external intervention, proceed seamlessly through formation of the definitive body. Now, taken from your paraphrase, it would seem like I contradicted myself. However, you thought I said a living human being, but what she said, and I quoted, was the formation of the definitive body, or what we think of when we think of a body. Now this is an important statement, as the argument being stated was one that was arguing for the formation of the body, and not whether or not the zygote was a living human organism. As we know, accidents such as a miscarriage, car crash, diseases like cancer or a chromosomal disorder, as well as an external intervention like abortion, can stop or inhibit the perfect development of the body. These are the type of things that are being referred to in the statement, not just necessarily injury. I'm sure we've all met people with physical deformities, like that of missing a limb or even deafness. But we still see those people as human, though they do not have a perfect definitive body. And living things repair themselves in as much as they are capable. For instance, if a man loses his arm in a freak accident, his body is not going to grow back that arm. However, it will heal the wound that was left by the missing limb. The next comment is from Raw Ray 192, which reads, "To say that it is a human life, what properties does a small cluster of cells share in common with a human? Virtually none, bar some of the biochemical pathways." Well, first of all, I think it's a pretty bad idea to downgrade the importance of the biochemical properties of human beings, especially in favor of simple comparison of visible physical likeness. The newly formed human, whether in the stage of a zygote, blastocyst, embryo, or fetus, has all the same chemical properties, DNA, and genetic information as a human in the stage of an infant, toddler, child, adolescent, adult, or elderly. The fact of the matter is that it does not change at all. The genetic information will always stay the same, and because of that, humans can only develop from something that is human. If a zygote was not a life, it would not be able to develop, as I've stated, and if it was not a human life, then it could not grow into an adult that we perceive as human. For instance, have you ever seen a woman give birth to something that truly was not human, like a monkey or a turtle? No. This is because the zygote that forms from the human sperm and human egg is human. Something that is not human cannot become human simply by growing and getting older. It must be a human from the start. Though some may point to, say, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly or a tadpole turning into a frog as counter arguments, I would say that that's nothing but semantics. The DNA of the caterpillar and the butterfly are the same, as are the tadpoles and the frogs. The names butterfly and frog are used simply to mark a development in the creature's life, not its change in who or what the creature is. Also, as Raw Ray 192 used the term cluster of cells, I would also like to point out that the part of those cells eventually join together to create what is called the placenta, or the sac that holds the embryo. What is interesting about this is the fact that for the past couple years, doctors have discovered that they can use the placenta that the patient was developed in order to obtain stem cells to use for therapy. These stem cells would not be effective unless the placenta, which was created from the same cells as the fully developed patient, did not have the same DNA and genetic makeup as the patient. So I think even modern advances in adult stem cell research show us that the blastocyst is still a human organism, that the zygote from which it forms is a human organism, and it proceeds along through its course of development. Raw Ray 192 also comments, "Is a zygote a life form, and is it wrong to abort it? There just isn't a good answer to this question." Well, the only way that there is not a good answer to this question is if it was a question of opinion and not of scientific fact. As I've stated in my previous video, there are many doctors, scientists, biologists, embryologists who have attested to the fact that life begins at fertilization. I really do encourage you to go back and look at that first video and look at the sources that are in there, because they all attest to the reasoning why they believe that life begins at fertilization. I mean, it's not a matter of opinion, as you see in the sources. But let's say that it is. Let's say that there was no way to scientifically determine at what point a newly formed zygote becomes a human life form. Well, if that were the case, then there would be even more need to protect the zygote. In fact, if you were to work for a demolition company, and your job was to be the person who blows up a building, and you decide to blow it up without first checking whether or not every human person had gotten out of that building, you would be charged with criminal negligence. Even if there was no one in there, you would still be charged with criminal negligence. The same rule applies when you go hunting. If you see something that might look like a human, but might be a deer, you wouldn't shoot at it until you were sure that it wasn't human. In that same vein, if we really can't know whether or not a zygote is human, then shouldn't we refrain from destroying it, in case one day we find it does? When we prove that it is not, then we can. But as of now, there is no proof that it's not a human either. I hope I clarified some things that maybe weren't clear in the last video. And I think even further, I've shown that human life does begin at fertilization.